headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.
Unusually for you, having made a statement on a Sunday, you were trending yesterday on Twitter by being attacked by those on the left and the right, which is probably a good place for you to be, claiming that your suggestion that this would be seen as a golden era of politics was entirely wrong, when in fact they clearly didn't get what you were saying.
Well, no, it's amazing. If people don't want to understand something, my goodness, they won't understand it. All I was saying was that you wait, it'll be so bad after 10 years of Keir Starmer that you'll look back on this as a golden age. I wasn't saying it was nice. I was saying, terrible as it is, you wait and see what's coming your way. I'm not really saying this. Obviously, I think that there's been a lot of foolish hysteria over Johnson by people who ought to have been angry 2 years ago and were silent and are now angry that they were fooled,
right?
Which is just misplaced and mistimed. And I think it's almost certain that this government is drawing peacefully to a close. The only question being how long it will take for it to depart, and how long it will take for Johnson to depart. For all I know, he'll stick it out to the next election. But I don't think there's that many now doubt there's a grave danger that there will be a possible majority of Starmer's New Labour and Sturgeon's SNP after the next election. This is a distinct possibility. What do people think will happen when this takes place? What do they want to happen if they rage and shout against the current government and keep on saying, I'll never support it again and all the rest of it? What do they think they'll get? No one's thinking about this at all. I'll bet you that the strategists of the Labour Party and of the Scottish Nationalists are thinking about it a lot. And what they must see is this, that the Scottish Nationalists will demand for supporting a Labour government in London a new referendum on independence, which I have to say I think will succeed. And in return, I suspect that Starmer, who obviously understands that if Scotland leaves the Union, his chances of a majority are gone, will want the electoral reform which the Blair government tried to achieve and failed to achieve, and go for some sort of proportional representation, after which I promise you there will never be anything even remotely approaching or calling itself a Conservative government in this country again. All countries which adopt proportional representation end up being governed by the left, which of course immediately dubs itself the centre, forever. So that'll be the end.
Yes, and it's interesting.
Starmer forever.
Yes. Let me just disagree with a couple of those suppositions, shall we say? I mean, I think you're right. There's only one way for Labour to get in, and that is to do a coalition with the SNP. But however, that would then, as you say, mean that they'd more or less defenestrate themselves, because they wouldn't be able to stay in if they kicked all the SNP MPs out of the chamber. I'm not sure that there would be a positive vote for independence in Scotland anymore. I think, talking to a lot of people up there, as I do, and I used to live up there, there's a lot less support for Nicola Sturgeon now than there was before the crazy lockdown stuff that she's been doing lately, particularly most recently suggesting that all classroom doors should have the bottom sawn off them in order to keep the air flowing freely through the school. I mean, you just cannot make it up.
But there's something. The last time I went up to Scotland, but during the last referendum, there seemed to me to be something abroad, a desire of
I think there was then, but I don't think it's there now.
I'm not sure it's gone away, and I think it had another referendum campaign. I think it would revive it. It's only the fact there's no campaign on that it's subsided. And I think one of the breaks on that at that time during the last referendum was there's still quite a substantial number of old-fashioned, well-educated Scottish people around who were not so keen. But in the intervening years, a lot of them have departed from us, and we have much younger electorates. And I sense that it will happen. But in any case, the order in which these things take place is the important thing. Starmer isn't going to let Scotland go until he's got the SNP to back his constitutional reforms, is he?
No,
so
true.
We'll get that whatever happens, whether Scotland decides to go or not. We'll get the constitutional reforms and some sort of proportional representation. Probably also the abolition of the House of Lords, which is very hard for anyone to argue against.
Yeah.
It's such a sink now. That will probably go and be replaced by some sort of Senate. But what will go and is the form of government which people don't realise doesn't really exist anywhere else in Europe that we have of first past the post elections in which the government can be chucked out and replaced overnight by another. That will go forever. You won't be able to see the Prime Minister chucked out on the street with his piano the following morning after an election. There will be months of negotiation, as there always are in Germany, over who will be in power. And those months of negotiation will be principally between parties of the left. So it will be a permanent change to the left, which will never go away. And these are the people, the ones who want us to wear face coverings until we die, and the ones who want to keep the country locked down until it expires. And these are the same people. They are the ones who will be permanently in charge. That's what you'll get. And after 10 years of that, I promise you'll be yearning for the ramshackle, cake-gate-infested days of Alexander Boris Johnson.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because the last time anything like that was tried, it was tried by Nick Clegg with the Lib Dems in a completely unadulterated mess of confusion when they tried to have a referendum on something called the AV voting system, which basically nobody understood, nobody could explain it, and surprise, surprise, it was never voted upon. So would there not have to be constitutionally another referendum for that?
I don't know. There's nothing. There is no constitutional requirement for referendums. In fact, the experience of the last one should have convinced most sensible people they're a disastrous way to carry on, because you have then two conflicting electoral mandates, one parliament and one referendum. Right. And if they don't agree, then where do you go? No, I think if you've got a big enough majority, you put a bill through.
But isn't it funny though? I mean,
to stop it.
But isn't it funny though? You talk about looking back on something as a golden age. I mean, it seems an age ago now, a kind of a complete sort of different era when we were sitting every day in a tent on College Green, waiting for something to happen inside the chamber, which would mean we could either move further away from Brexit or further towards it. And, we're now in a completely different era. And like all things in politics, once Boris Johnson moves out, as he inevitably will, whether it's the fault of his wife, whether it's the fault of his aide, Munira Mirza, who was apparently described as his brain, we'll forget about it and we'll move on. And I, unlike you, think that there is a future with a different Conservative Prime Minister and a big Conservative majority and a proper Conservative government.
Okay, I have to tease you here and ask you who this paragon is who you think is going to take over.
Yeah, well, that's a very difficult question.
Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, I'm actually, how some people say...
Tugendhat are we going for here?
Well, actually, I'd quite like to see somebody like Steve Baker in charge, because he's not cut from the same cloth as everybody else. And I know that you'll probably say, yeah, but he doesn't have the experience. Well, I don't particularly want Rishi Sunak. I don't particularly want Liz Truss. I don't particularly want Michael Gove or anybody in the cabinet. I'd quite like to see them all swept away.
Well, did you see... And Michael Gove, did you see Dominic Wilson in the Sunday Times yesterday finally cottoning on to the point I've been making for years, which is Michael Gove is the new Blair?
Yes.
The party he ought to be leading is the Labour Party.
Well, you're absolutely right.
He's one of them, and he's been open about it. He used to publish articles in the Times saying he was in love with Blair.
Yeah.
Finally, people are gathering. Michael Gove is not a right-wing politician. He's actually a part of the new Labour movement who happens to have wandered by mistake into the Conservative Party.
Well, it's quite clear now that in order to be successful...
So often people just seem to blunder through the wrong entrances.
Well, this is it. I mean, because it's so easy to confuse the entrances and the signs are the same. The point is this, though, that it's not really now fashionable to be a conviction politician. It's not really fashionable to believe in anything, because you get told, well, you can't really do that. Don't do that. Just do nothing. Because we're now in a period, it seems to me we are now do nothing.
Quietly slipped aside. I mean, you don't really think Steve Baker's going to be next leader of the Conservative Party, do you?
No, but you asked me. You asked me. No, but you asked me. I mean, even he doesn't. Even he doesn't think he's going to be the next leader.
Be realistic. Of those who might conceivably become leader of the Conservative Party, be realistic. Which one of those is going to achieve the fantastic transformation that you hope for?
Well.
Silence falls, Mike. There's nobody there.
There isn't. No, you're right. There absolutely isn't anyone. Although I quite like look at Penny Mordaunt. Actually, she looks like somebody who could become quite good. Who could?
I mean, okay. Well, you didn't look. You just look into her political career a bit and see if.
All right. Well, let me say this to you then. I mean, the problem is people say, well, there isn't really anybody better. Well, I could make the same argument by saying there can't be anybody any worse. But
you're not. But this doesn't bother me, because I keep telling you we're all doomed anyway. I'm just letting people know the nature and speed of the doom which they face. I'd say I had a perfectly sound plan in 2010. Everybody ignored me, so that's your problem. I can sit here and say happily, "I told you so, you silly fools. I told you what you could have done. You didn't do it. Now you're getting what you deserve." don't complain to me.
But is it now irreparably lost?
Well, that's the way it looks to me. I'd be happy to be proved wrong if anybody can, but you've just failed to do so. So I keep trying. But the other thing, Keir Starmer, everybody
I can only work with what I've got, Peter.
Yeah, I know, exactly. So can we all. But then look at Keir Starmer and say, well, how dull he is. And indeed, he is dull.
He is dull.
Uninspirational in the extreme. But then again, look at his past. He was, for some time, in his 20s, on the editorial board of an outfit called Socialist Alliance, which was so... It followed a branch of Trotskyism so obscure that even I wasn't aware of it until recently, called Pabloism.
All right.
It fascinating political tendency, but what he said in an interview with the New Statesman a couple of years ago, maybe longer now, is he hasn't really changed his politics since then. He hasn't disavowed and said, "Oh, that was my youth. I was wild in my youth. Now I've become a conservative." He said, "No, I don't really disagree with anything we said at the time." And most of it, I have to tell you, was sexual politics, which, of course, as we now know, is central to everything that governments do. And also green, the green agenda, the what has now become net zero, which is busily destroying the economies of the major Western nations, leaving the world free for Chinese governance. I mean, that is what he was wedded to when he was editing this not particularly sparkling magazine, issues of which are still available for the interested on the internet.
Okay.
You want to look it up.
And it's called Pabloism. We'll definitely do that. But
Pabloism,
which takes us back inside Downing Street, because you wrote also at the weekend about Mirza, who was so radical that Ken Livingstone called her loony lefty.
That's right. But this is all part of the conversion. This is why I kept telling people that Boris Johnson was a left-winger. When he decided to campaign to be mayor of London, he and Linton Crosby, his election guru, worked out that the thing to do was to be as like Ken Livingstone as possible. And so he did. He became a left-wing person to become mayor of a very left-wing city, and which it is. And he couldn't have done it any other way. And one of the people who helped him do it was Munira Mirza, who I've never actually been able to establish that she was a member of the Revolutionary Communist Party. A number of people write this. I tried quite hard to discover, but she's certainly very closely associated with that curious tendency. Which is also represented by quite a few other people, all the Spiked Online crowd, and the BBC Radio 4 programme Moral Maze seems to have a constitutional rule that it cannot have an episode without somebody from Spiked Online being on it, either on the panel or as a witness. But it's a very influential body, way beyond its quite small size. I first encountered it as a group called Living Marxism, which then thought that was a bit obvious, so it rechristened itself LM. And then there was all that trouble they had with some claims they made about Yugoslavia, and they dissolved themselves. But very interesting tendency centering around the Professor Frank Fioretti, a sociology professor at the University of Kent. And it's, how should I say, it's the essence of Trotskyism. Yeah. And there she is in Downing Street, and everyone's saying, "Gosh, what a tragedy!" Yeah, but the Tory government has lost this brilliant person. I don't actually brilliant.
Please tell me that politics wasn't always like this, though. I mean, I seem to believe that before, and I could be wrong about this, but before Blair, there wasn't this kind of panoply of special advisors and hundreds of people. When they told me the size of the Prime Minister's actual department, which apparently has thousands of people working in it, you think, what the hell are they all doing? And they've all come from these rather obscure sects and strange political parties and strange kind of clubs at university, haven't they?
But mainly it's now a career. It's like going into the city. People decide at Oxford they're going to become special advisors, and then they become special advisors, and then they're selected for safe seats, and then they become ministers. The next thing you know, they're in Downing Street having parties. But this began in the late Wilson years. There was a sort of theory that the civil service was not would isolate radical and adventurous ministers by surrounding them with stuffy advisors, and they should be given more politicized special advisors to help them formulate policies of the kind they wanted to do. This began in the Wilson years. It expanded a bit in the Thatcher years. And then when the Blair people came along, it exploded. And the Tories have adopted the same thing. But I remember once having a lunch, a Mail on Sunday lunch at one of the three of the party conferences in succession with a load of supposedly starring spads. And the thing about it, if you hadn't known which party conference you were at, you couldn't have told them apart.
I mean, it's usually just the
People
clothing.
have roughly the same opinions. They're also vaguely left-wing on practically everything, but also fantastically ambitious. It's because it's a job, and the rewards in politics these days are very considerable, because not just by rising to the considerable salaries of senior ministers, but after you left your job as a minister, huge numbers of things open up to you. If you're prime minister, you're pretty certain to become a millionaire quite quickly, and others don't do so badly either.
Right.
It is a career like going into the city, and people now follow it, and most of them are on the left.
And that I think has got to be one of the reasons why it's so awful, why it's so out of touch, and why it doesn't appear to represent really the ordinary people of this country. I mean, I know some people that have worked in Downing Street over the last few years, and quite frankly, I wouldn't trust them to go down to the shops and bring back the groceries, because they're so out of touch. They wouldn't have a clue where to find them, wouldn't have a clue how much they would cost, and wouldn't know even where the shop was.
Oh, well, but this is a huge problem with the kind of education system we've chosen to have. In which it's the main objective of all school education is to get people to university. They're not really taught, as I constantly complain, how to think. They're taught what to think, how to fit in, how to tick whatever boxes are necessary. And at the end of it, they're trained in conforming to a certain set of ideas, which are almost universally held. And if, as I find out to my cost every few days, if you publicly disagree with that set of ideas, they have great barrels of green slime which they can pump you with.
Yes,
but it's one of the worst things about it.
You're still here, though. You're still here.
They're conformists.
The point is, they haven't managed to silence you completely. I mean, these are people who think you go to Tesco's with a suitcase. I mean, that's the level of their intellectual ability, you know. But let's talk a little bit about the masks, talking about conformity, and talking about... You retweeted a very interesting piece about whether or not there was ever any point in wearing them. Tell us about that.
Well, it's on the Unheard website, which is an excellent website for which I occasionally write, declaring an interest, not very often, but a bit. And it often has original stuff on it. In this particular piece, not having in front of me, I can't quote directly, but what it basically shows is that if anybody had sat down and looked at those jurisdictions where masking was being enforced and compared them where it wasn't, that somebody has done this, and there just isn't any real evidence that they're particularly effective. Now, I've known this for a long time because of the Danmarks, the Danish mask study. The most extraordinary thing, a very contentious issue right in the middle of the whole lockdown period. There's a study made on it, which is then not published for quite a while. And when it is published, it's plainly been quite seriously rewritten before being published. And then nobody in any major media in this country, apart from me, actually reports the results, which is that there isn't really any evidence that loose cloth masks are any use. So what has emerged from all this is that the N95 masks, the expensive ones which fit tightly to the face and which you have to wear with some considerable care, they are quite effective. But the normal cloth masks, which most people go out and about in, really don't make very much difference at all.
But so why are so many people still wearing them, you think?
I think for the reasons I've often stated, a lot of people are afraid and do believe this, and the truth about them has not been properly broadcast or published in anything like as widely as it should have been. So they don't know that the evidence for their usefulness is so weak. And then the other thing is, of course, it's a badge of
virtue,
of unselfishness. Yes. People think, they've been told by the government, you're wearing the masks to keep other people safe, not to keep yourself safe. If they made it a campaign to keep yourself safe, I think more people would have abandoned them. But as long as you're being told, as long as you wear this, you're helping to protect others, then many people see it as a mark of civilization and of goodness that they continue to wear them. And I'm sure that's what they feel. That's one of the reasons why when I see people doing this, I inwardly think, oh, for heaven's sake, but outwardly, I think the only thing to do is be polite to them. Yeah. They think they're doing something good.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I just kind of, don't just ignore them, really. I mean, it seems a ludicrous thing to do. One final question for you. The Bishop of Brexit, the piece in the Times today, I don't expect you to join my campaign because I know it's not your thing. But I'm now going to actively campaign for the dissolution of the Church of England because I think it now has absolutely no point to it whatsoever.
Well, how can you tell? It has no impact on the lives of most people.
No.
I mean, as far as I can tell, the Church of England is the 1662 Book of Common Prayer and the authorised version of the Bible and an evensong. And as long as those continue, then it's a valuable part of both of our society and our culture, and I defend those. But the rest of it, quite frankly, you can keep. The difficulty with the Church of England is that large parts of it don't really believe in the things that it was established to propagate. But I don't think even if you feel as you do, I think you would actually miss it if it's gone. There's one other thing about it which I will defend. You encounter this if you go to church or have much to do with the church. Quite a lot of young men and women go out, often with their families, to live in those parts of the country where basically the police don't go, the social workers don't go, nobody much goes, to try and do some good. And that, in every parish in England, is something the Church of England does, and nobody else will do it if it's gone. And it would be a loss if it stopped.
Yes,
they're often very brave and they're very dedicated, and they should get a bit more encouragement for what they do, instead of the church spending all its money on bishops. It's like the Navy, the church. It's got more bishops than it has cathedrals, just as the Navy has more admirals than it has ships.
Yeah. It's always a bad plan. It's always a bad idea to move away from what your core business is, I think. It's probably
I think so, but they do it, and it seems to be unstoppable. If you play any part in the Church of England or attempt to, I mean, I've given up. Church politics is a dismal business, but it just seems to be set in its upper levels on its own self-destruction. But that doesn't undo the profound good that quite a lot of the people at the bottom of the organisation, and but this is the case with so many organisations, it's the people actually doing the work at the bottom who are worth preserving. The top levels, it's easy to see that you don't really want to bother to pay for them anymore.
Yeah, no, quite.
Good talk.
Hot talk. Bold talk. Talk radio.
Listen on your smart speaker.
Watch it live on your smart TV.
The world headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.